2024 Killam School Building Committee meeting to order, and we'll take a roll call vote since we have some people remote. Karen?
Here.
John?
Here.
Kirk?
Here.
Sarah?
Here.
Ed is not here. Greg?
Here.
Pat is not here tonight, and Nancy?
Here.
And Carla's here. We also have two members from Colliers. We have Mike and Susanna. We have LBAs. We have Jenny and Lee. We have our town manager. We have Jane Wellman, Derek, and our superintendent, and Jackie, and Joe Huggins. Kevin Capuzzi. Keep going.
Got them all.
Great, thank you, everyone. Just a quick review of the agenda. We'll take public comments, we'll have liaison reports, we're going to have an update, designer reports and updates, we're going to have an OPM reports on financials, we're going to talk a little bit about the communication working group, and we're going to get an update from them. We actually don't have any financial update. I should say we're going to have a vote on the financial update on the payment process. We don't have any warrants or invoices, and we'll approve prior minutes and talk about future agenda items. So I don't think we have anybody from the public unless Tom has a public comment.
No.
Okay. We'll start with building committee liaison reports in the room first. Does anyone have a report? No? Okay, any reports online? Perfect. Okay, so we'll move on to Jenny and Lee for the designer reports and updates.
Can I just stand there so people...
Yes, please.
Just a minute while I share my screen. Okay. So today I'm going to give you an update on, as per usual, what we've done. We'll talk about the sustainability goals and then what we're going to do next. So what we've done in the last, since whenever we met last, sorry, I don't remember off the top of my head, we are, the educational visioning process is ongoing. We've had a couple of workshops, and we're going to report back to the school building committee on March 11th. The site survey field work has been completed, and we're going to report back, actually these next three items: site survey, traffic study, and existing conditions assessment. We're going to report back to you all on March 25th as part of an existing conditions overview and package. And we had the sustainability working group kickoff on January 29th, and I'm going to report out what we talked about there. Just checking in on where we are in our schedule. We're here in the second week of February. And yeah, still working on existing conditions, traffic analysis, and we've done a bunch of the educational planning with more to come. We also received everyone's comments from the project charter and incorporated them into a revised version. I'm not going to review those or talk through them today, but they're included in your packet, so you all can review them. And we're calling this the revised project charter, not the final project charter, because we think it's important to keep this as a living document, and we can continue to modify and refine as we go. So I'm just gonna scoot forward here. Okay, so in the sustainability section, so I'm going to kind of recap some of the important points of our discussion in the sustainability working group, and then I'll tell you the kind of goals that we came up with based on our discussion. So the first part of the recap is that there are these baseline requirements, what do I call them? Requirements and givens that we're required to meet. Either some are from the MSBA Green Schools policy, and then there's the Massachusetts stretch code, which is part of the building code. And then the last part here is the Massachusetts opt-in specialized code, which ties back into some of the MSBA incentive requirements. So I'll just try to go through these in a pretty, quick way. So with the MSBA Green Schools policy, the base requirements are we have to meet LEED Silver, we have to meet the Stretch Energy Code, which you have to anyway because Reading is a stretch code community. There are requirements for commissioning requirements for MEP systems for envelope and LEED, and we have to meet achieve 3 LEED points in materials and resources or indoor environmental quality. Then for the up to the 3 to 4% additional reimbursement requires 2 things, or for 1 additional percentage, we can achieve that by meeting 5 indoor environmental quality points in the LEED system, and for an additional 3%, we need to meet the opt-in specialized stretch code, which, hold that thought, it's at the bottom of the list. I'll explain what that is. Then in the Massachusetts Stretch Energy Code, which is pretty new, it only came in, I think, in January of last year, so about a year ago. There are 2 pathways to the basic energy compliance, and both of these requirements focus on energy demand rather than energy use. So this TEDI, total energy density something, I should know that. It really focuses on energy demand rather than energy use, and what that means is that it focuses on passive strategies rather than active strategies. So it has very stringent requirements for the building envelope. So we're basically designing a building that is very energy efficient, and then we add a heating system to it, but the code doesn't have as many requirements for the heating system as it does for the envelope, if that makes any sense. So there's 2 pathways to compliance. One is the TEDI pathway, which is an energy modeling pathway, I think, and the other is passive house certification. So we need to do some more discussion and consideration about which pathway we recommend to pursue. There's additional stretch code requirements around air leakage, energy recovery, ED charging, all these other things that we will have to meet. Then for the Massachusetts opt-in specialized code, there's 3 pathways. So this is kind of important because it gets to whether it's an all-electric building. So one pathway is that it's a zero net energy building. That means that there's on-site energy production, for example, solar photovoltaics, that are greater than the building energy use. So you're effectively meeting all of your energy needs on site. We think that's really difficult to achieve in this climate because it's difficult to do it with solar PV, and it's difficult. Another option is all electric, an all electric building, so just using no fossil fuels, and that's quite relatively easily achievable and becoming quite common in new buildings. Third option is mixed fuel, which requires a certain amount of on-site renewable capacity, and then some requirements for wiring for future electrification. So we'll talk about whether it's an all-electric building in the goals section, but basically because this specialized stretch code, the easiest way to achieve it is to go all-electric, and you get this 3% reimbursement. We think that that speaks strongly to moving in the direction of an all-electric building. That was a lot of talking. I want to ask if there's any questions before I move on.
If I speak, should I stand somewhere else?
You are welcome to come up here or there, wherever you like,
Well, I just wanted to...
just so people can hear.
Say-
As long as you speak into
You
them.
can come here with me.
Okay, I just wanted, thank you, Jenny. It was very clear. I wanted to say 2 or 3 things that I recognized when you were speaking. First of all, actually, Swampscott is going to be a gold LEED building without trying. I just wanted you to know that because I was just talking to the people over there, and they didn't even have to meet many of these things. So I just wanted you to know that, and the other things are fairly new. A lot of the things in that second line where we have done before, but the Teddy and the Passive House, it doesn't surprise me that what their real focus is on the envelope. Lowering the energy use intensity, EUI, when we speak to our, you met Bomshi, our energy consultant and stuff. All this talk about net zero and all that kind of stuff, that's just kind of words. What we want to do is lower our EUI, lower our need for energy. And that is our real focus here. And I think that's what that Teddy, who no one quite understands. But Passive House is all about that. And all this testing and all this air leakage stuff is all about that. And clearly we're going to do that. The only other thing I wanted to say is that when we did get comments about the project charter pieces, I tried to change them minimally, but really listen to people's points and try to just kind of shift them a little bit and keep them still kind of general. But there was one comment path about electric buildings. Why do we keep saying electric building? We shouldn't make that assumption and all that. I think I put in parentheses electric or with a question mark at that point. It's pretty clear that we're probably going to have an all-electric building. Maybe I can't read the future, but we probably will. But it doesn't need to be something we talk about all the time just because it is. In order to meet all of these, the Passive House and all of these other things, we probably will need that, right, anyway. That's all I want to say.
Julie?
Yes.
And unfortunately, Pat's not here, and I think his comments came through.
Yeah.
With
It's okay, I just wanted, he'll understand.
Can you talk a little bit about the additional reimbursements? Is that, in terms of, is it overall, is it for a portion, is it for that portion? How does that reimbursement work?
Is Mike on? Mike, do you want to speak to that? Mike.
So the reimbursement, what it is the MSBA has a baseline reimbursement that they'll provide, and then we can get these additional points. So what it's going to do is that 3 or 4% is going to increase the MSBA share on the eligible cost. So when we say eligible cost, everybody always wants to understand what that is. So the MSBA has a number of different requirements and different processes that they go through. So there's a cap on the designer's fee and on the OPM fee based on a percentage of construction value. Anything over that is ineligible. There's caps on site work. Anything above that is ineligible. They typically don't pay for asbestos abatement because they assume that the district should have already done that. So that type of demolition is ineligible. So there's a number of ineligible items. They kind of take those off the top, and then whatever is left is the eligible cost, and that percentage would be on that full eligible cost. The other thing that they do is they have a cap on the overall construction cost per square foot. Back in October of 23, they just did a very substantial update to that, so that cap has got more in line with where we're seeing construction values. It's not fully in line. When I say more in line, we were seeing districts before October, if they had an 80% reimbursement, which is basically the max that you can get, 80% of eligible translated to less than 50% of actual. And so there was a real substantial difference there. So the adjustments that the MSBA did in October has substantially increased to their share. So that's something as we get into the first estimates and we start to see where the dollars are, we can have some further discussions on that. And if people need to know sooner than that, we can show you there's a template from the MSBA that we can share with you and we can start having those discussions. But I'll give you an example. Suzanne and I are working in Haverhill right now. In Haverhill, on a $160 million job, the adjustments in September was about $20 million of additional MSBA reimbursement versus what it would have been before that adjustment.
Thank you, Mike.
Any other?
Can I?
Yeah, please.
All electric, does that come with a premium cost? Is that traditional? So why do we assume that this building is best to be all electric?
You stood up.
Well, in order to have a building that has no carbon, not embodied, but, produces no carbon or uses no fossil fuels, it would need to be all electric.
Well, electric off the grid uses a hell of a lot of carbon. We're not producing much carbon.
Again, we are talking about, I know we have this conversation, and you are correct with your but what we're talking about are the things that affect our budget directly and affect our codes directly, because whether or not it's off the grid or not, whether those things come from another source, we are focused on the things that need to happen to meet the codes that we are given. So that's where we're coming from. We don't want to be ignorant to the facts that the world is a more complicated place than that. So maybe I shouldn't have said we assume that it's going to be all electric, but it has to do with the criteria which we're trying to meet, unless we don't want to meet that criteria. In other words, if we don't want to meet the opt-in specialized stretch code and get that additional millions of dollars in reimbursable, we don't have to do it. So, and we don't want to assume that that's what you want, because that may not be what you want.
So this is a financial decision because we can get extra reimbursement, is that what you're saying?
Well, I suppose if we were to say to you that your building, this is completely hypothetical, your building is $80 million and the MSBA will either pay you $40 million or $44 million. And these are the things that we would have to do to get the $44 million from them. And therefore, your taxpayers would pay that much less.
Yep.
Now, when you asked about, is the electric building more expensive than gas, I think we're finding that it's becoming in line, that these are just pieces of equipment, and that you either make a decision that you're going to run them all off electricity from an electric source or a fossil fuel source. Doing a hybrid can often be the most expensive because you actually have two sets of equipment in the future too, and I know you care about that, like for operating or maintenance or replacement. To have different systems to have to replace can often be more expensive in those charts. But I want to promise you that we're going to run the numbers, we're going to do with our energy consultant, we're going to keep our promise to do those different numbers so that you can compare and decide for yourself what you want to do together. That's what I want to promise.
Yeah, that was my point, is, we seem to be making an assumption that
Yes.
all electric is the best.
And we all know what that means.
Numbers may not
Right.
prove that. Now, maybe some people may have the feeling that all electric, even though it might cost more, is better because it doesn't involve fossil fuels. But most of the electricity produced in the United States comes from fossil fuels. Today. And for, the next 30, 40 years, probably.
Well, we have someone here who might know that.
I know, but
But let's just say that we know that there are moves for everyone to move to renewable sources like hydroelectric and things like that. And all of these stretch codes and the opt-in codes, they're all pushing clearly for a certain direction. And the direction that all of these things are telling us to go in the next today, in the next 10 years, in the next 50 years, they're telling us to go and make a building or a site that is electrically run off of, so that we can start to wean ourselves from fossil fuels more and more. They're making that's what they're telling you too, probably as a company. And so one of the problems is that because we're doing this and we're kind of in the midst of it, we do tend to assume things. And I agree with you that there's no reason to. Let's just follow the facts as they lead us. Do the work. Let them decide what you want to do themselves. And we're in on that. I think that's a better point.
yeah. The way electric heating has become economical, competitive with fossil fuels is by the development of heat pump technology. By itself, resistance heating is nowhere near competitive with gas. When you turn on a wire and it gets hot, that's incredibly expensive relative to gas heating. The technology has evolved from refrigeration principles, the heat pump, basically.
Yeah. So John, this is why I'm so much more interested conceptually in the idea of EUI and lowering our energy needs.
Yes.
Before we even think about renewable and what else we're doing. To focus on the envelope of a building and its orientation and, heat and light and things like that is number one, as we talked about one other time. And then to step down with our windows and our mechanical systems, making them more, whether they're electric or whatever they are.
Yeah.
What we're finding is that especially with Vamshi and others who do all these schools, who's our energy consultant, is that the difference between starting off with, say, geothermal and certain geothermal wells, that's worth almost 10 EUI from 35 to 25. And what we're trying to do is get that first cost before we even add renewable resources and even think about where that energy is coming from. We want to get that as low as possible. And we're finding that is the basic pathway. One of the interesting things that Jenny alluded to was that with a small site, we're going to have a couple of challenges. The first one is we may not have enough room for a whole bunch of geothermal wells without getting complicated about it, because there's not much room to drill where there's not a building during some point. And the second one is, unless you have a really nice big site or a lot of roof, where are you going to put all those photovoltaics? And we probably, our experience tells us that we probably will not be able to provide enough PVs, no matter what we do, to do it all on site. I think those are probably pretty safe assumptions, but we get ahead of ourselves.
Lee, if I can maybe just step in and kind of give my two cents on it, I think we have a process we're going through, and just because we think we have an assumption doesn't mean that that's the final answer on the item. You know, we have to have an assumption, then we have to either prove that that assumption is correct or prove that there's an alternative that is better, if you will. So when we say there's all electric, that's what we're hearing from a lot of community members, but we do have to do that process that you were talking about, going through, evaluating it, and I think you're absolutely right. You know, I think when we look at the Teddy model and when we look at the passive house, for example, I'm not sure that passive house is going to be doable for a school. I know last time I looked at that, it was very difficult because we want large windows in a school and passive house tends to have smaller windows. So it's probably going to lead us toward that Teddy modeling, but ultimately what it's leading to is the better our envelope is, the less heat we need to bring into the building to keep it at temperature, and that's what's going to drive those numbers down. So I think working on that envelope is a key in either of these. And then as far as the heating systems, we're going to evaluate a gas boiler, we're going to evaluate air source heat pumps, ground source heat pumps, other systems. To John's point, we're not going to evaluate electrical radiant heating because, you know, the element heating is just not efficient, and we know that we can kind of cancel that one off right off the top. But we are going to evaluate everything, and through that evaluation, it's going to lead us to the correct answer here. So while we think we may have some answers right now, I would caution anybody to think that the answers are set in stone right now, or that we have the answers here. We're gonna recommend it for you, at least. You ultimately make the decision as a committee, but we're gonna recommend we go through the process, whether it's LEED, whether it's sustainability, whether it's parking lot size or field size or new building versus renovation. We feel the MSBA process is proper, and we're gonna go through that process with you, and that's gonna help inform you so you can make the correct decision to your community.
So here's another way of looking at it, and I'll ask a totally different question that's the same thing. In your, one of the things you could tell us is, just like, you know, we want to reduce the amount of total carbon in the project as much as we can feasibly. One of the things you could tell us is we want to maximize our reimbursable from the MSBA. Or you could say, that's less important to us than what we want. You know what I mean? You can tell us what your priorities are, and that's a different way of looking at it. We look at things like this, and since we're always trying to make you happy and like we know that this is a taxpayer project, we always look at the total cost, and we know that those things represent money. And we want to be responsible with your money. And we will give you the option to do that as far as you can. But I also know that we're looking at sustainability here. And if I were to ask the superintendent or others, what is the most important thing about this project? They might say, the education of our children. And it might not be about sustainability at all. And so what we'll all learn about each other is that people have different priorities. And just because our list was broken into different categories, that doesn't mean if I took all those things and put them in a list of your actual priorities, what would be your number one priority? In the visioning sessions, it's this building is all about the children. And so I don't want to lose sight of the whole. The holistic view is that energy and sustainability, while there's so much pressure put on it, and it is so important, is it the reason you're building the building, or is it something we're trying to embed within the building? That's my best on that.
I also when I hear we get, we have additional reimbursement from the MSBA, I say, okay, that's great, but what does that mean, right? If the cost is going to be higher and our additional reimbursement is going to give us more, but for another scenario, our cost is not as high, but our reimbursement, right? We need to figure out what is worth it for us, right?
Exactly.
What are the long-term costs associated with running the building? Because it might, different things are going to work out at different times. So there's a lot of factors with each different sustainability goal. There's a lot of factors that go into that. And the financial factors are part of it, and what we get out of it is part of it. So
Yeah, and my understanding from all those charts that Vamshi will do is that and the mechanical, is that they do compare those cost lines, in different ways. I like this conversation because what this does is it forces me to continue to be more as open-minded as possible and for me to follow the process as well. And I appreciate the reminding.
So Lee, sorry, I'll jump in. So just wanted to ask, so I think that it would be helpful, illustrative, in evaluating the best option for us to visit those buildings that are falling into one of those two categories, the MA stretch energy or the MA opt-in, right? So if we have some sample buildings that we can go where we can visit or collect data on equipment costs, maintenance, and return on investment, I think that would be helpful in informing not only the committee, but then when we have to explain to the community about the choices we've made, we'll be able to do so.
Yeah, the visits will help less. The visits may not give you actual numbers, but they'll give you people to talk to about how they work and how they are working and how you want to work.
Yeah, and I think we can.
But we are doing the analysis of the operating costs and all of those things also for the different kinds of systems and their different life cycles.
So we do have a number of samples sample buildings that have a good history, right? Of maybe a 3-year history or 3 to 5-year history that we could.
It's all kind of new again.
We do. That's what I was going to say. Is we can get you samples of buildings that have used ground source heat pumps or air source heat pumps versus traditional boilers, for example. But the stretch energy code update and the opt-in specialized code both just came out and went into effect in July of last year.
Yeah.
So they haven't even been in operation for a year yet. So the buildings that are being built underneath that right now are buildings that started after July. So most of those, especially school-wise, wouldn't even be completed yet.
So I think that this would be of help, like longitudinal data, like the collection of some longitudinal data and some evidence, so that we can forward with confidence to our community and our stakeholders. Here's what we've chosen and why, and here's the evidence to support.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
And I think looking at the EUI and looking at the different systems is how we can do it, and we can relate those EUIs to the energy code. In reality, they're just driving those EUI numbers even lower, basically.
can you come up to the microphone, Tom?
Yeah, I just wanted to make the point that to get back to a month or two ago when we started this process, Lee and the design team were very clear on the fact that that design team is going to design a building for us that hopefully the town is going to be able to use for 40, 50, 60 years, a long time. So certainly having some flexibility built into that design makes a lot of sense. And I think that's one of the prime reasons driving us towards an all-electric building, is because for long term, that offers much more flexibility. As John said today, he's right. The electric supply that we supply right now, there's a lot of carbon in those lights coming off of there. But that's going to change over time, hopefully. However, if we design in a gas boiler, even an efficient one today, we're going to be burning gas for 20 years of the life of that product. So I don't want us to lose sight of the fact that all electric building does give us a lot of flexibility today and for the long term.
One of my concerns about jumping in fully with new technology, and heat pumps are new technology. You know, they've been around a few years, but they're still not developed the way, they're like a Model T Ford relative to 2023, 2024 Mercedes. You know, they've still got a lot of learning to do. They may turn out to be, from a maintenance point of view, unreliable, expensive to repair, expensive to replace. We still don't know that. You know, that this is a new technology. And I think we need to be cognizant of the fact that the old technology we know how to maintain it, we know when it goes wrong how to fix it in-house. With the new technology, the heat pumps, Joe may not be able to fix it in-house. He may have to call in somebody all the time. And that's something we should factor in, I think.
And that's a valid point, and as Lee pointed out, we're going to evaluate all of these things and do engineering analysis and compare the different options.
Yeah, well, that was my basic start off, was, you know, why would we, in a heading which says requirements and givens, why would we think that all electric is a given?
Right. It seems that that's the direction we're going. But
Well,
I don't think any
just to
of
be
us
really
can
clear,
say that.
it basically says 3 pathways: zero energy, all electric, or mixed fuel, and it gives 3 different approaches. So there you have it. Enough said. I'm on board. We're going to really analyze this thing, and I hope you'll really understand what is right for you. We have time.
Thanks. Great discussion. Shall I go on to the next? Thank you.
Yeah, hurry up.
We've touched on this, before on the rebates and incentives, and we continue to have more investigation to do on each of these categories. But I could just say that we will continue to investigate and track all of the incentives available for the project on the sustainability front, and provide that information to you as we go so that you can use that as part of your decision-making process. I think I have 5 or 6 slides here on the sustainability goals, which again are based on the conversation that we had with the sustainability working group that we've consolidated and tried to wordsmith here. These are different than what you received in your pre-packet because I had some more wordsmithing to do. So I think we'll just read through them and discuss. And they're separated into like 5 categories, which are based on the LEED criteria, just to give us a structure to work with. Okay, so on the site, we have 4 goals. So 1 is to provide safe routes for walking and cycling. 2 is to consider alternatives for rainwater management, such as rain gardens. 3 is to select exterior lighting that reduces light pollution while providing adequate illumination for safety and visibility. And 4 is incorporate opportunities for environmental science and nature-based learning and play. Should I go through all of the goals slides and then we can kind of have discussion, or should we stop at each one? I would say go through all of them because there may be ones that, you know, you have like, well, what about this one? It's on the next slide, so I'll just continue. So on energy, 1 is to reduce the building's operational carbon footprint by employing passive strategies, high efficiency building systems, and energy metering. Eliminate fossil fuel use by designing an all-electric facility. Okay, we're going to change that one based on today's conversation to evaluate or consider an all-electric facility, and something like evaluate all options as part of the design process. And 3 is consider solar PV and geothermal systems if they make sense from a cost-value perspective. So again, that evaluating those options.
And I'm not allowed to talk, but I'm going to say something. I remember one person saying very distinctly, Greg, it was you, said, we were showing a picture of a kid and one of those, what are those called, those screens? The energy. when you walk into the building and there's like a dashboard.
Oh, yeah,
And he goes,
interactive, yeah,
"Well,
dashboard.
let's not do one of those dashboards in the lobby." And I thought that was really funny because first of all, it's an elementary school and it's not like that technical. But secondly, it was all the craze we've put in lots of dashboards. And unless somebody's really using it, it really is kind of just a thing. So I liked that somebody actually said something to the negative. Please don't do that. So anyway, next.
On the water criteria or goals, one is to conserve water through efficient indoor fixtures, water metering, and HVAC condensate capture. 2 is consider alternatives for rainwater management. That's kind of a repeat because it touches on both site and water, but anyway, same goal. Utilize native plants that are low maintenance, require less water, and support the local ecosystem. On materials and resources, select materials with low embodied carbon in order to reduce the building's total carbon footprint. Consider solid waste reduction strategies, including recycling and composting. And select interior materials that promote occupant well-being, such as low-emitting materials, and avoid red list materials. I think this is the last one. Indoor environmental quality. Provide natural daylight and views for all occupied spaces with operable windows and controls that allow for individual options for thermal comfort and lighting. And select interior materials. Oh, this is a repeat. It touches on both the indoor environmental quality, about the materials that promote occupant well-being. Okay, discussion. Questions? Yes, Karen.
I have a quick question. One thing that the working group didn't talk about, but we all need to be cognizant of is this project is a part of an overall strategy for our community that brings us into compliance with the Mass Climate Law. We have a major goal to reduce carbon emissions by 2030. We need to be, correct me if I'm wrong, we need to be net zero, not producing any carbon emissions by 2050. That isn't that far off. So what I was wondering, the question is whether...
You can probably tell us, you can write an email what that exactly is we're promising. All of the things we're doing, the MSBA is clearly like pushing well beyond that anyway. So we're going to meet those goals with this building. We're going to help your town. This building will be different than any building you've ever built here before. We want to make sure that it's not so different that it's an albatross. It's more like the next generation or the next evolution in compliance and in line. But let's put it up there as one of your main goals as a town, because that's why some of you are here as town administrator types, to tell us that.
If I can just make a comment. Sitting in the educational planning groups and hearing the teachers speak and people talking about the educational visioning and the focus being on the students, right? And how I look at it from a school committee perspective is, we're there to build a building for students and for student learning. And part of that, too, is what happens with the budget after, right? After the building is commissioned, what does our budget look like, right? I think Derek and I sat in a meeting at a story of a school where they said, oh, our ongoing maintenance costs are so much higher. And to me, that directly affects the students. That takes money out of their pockets and puts it into the building. That, to me, is not acceptable. Not an acceptable thing to come out of this.
So when we do this right, we do total life cycle costs,
Yes.
which talks about, well, we have to insert certain portions of maintenance and staffing. In other words, there's the mechanical maintenance and there's the mechanical operational costs, how much we predict, fuel or electricity will cost, and then they kind of escalate it and all of that kind of stuff, and it hits your 20-year, 30-year points and all of that. But then there are things like, hey, we need an extra crossing guard. We need a bus or less bus. We need and we need an extra person you've made everything out of glass. We need one person who all they do is clean fingerprints off glass all day long. Like, that's a real discussion. Or if you really want to make a choice later on when we're looking and we're putting tile on all the walls up to 4 feet, and we say, well, you could save $250,000 if you take all that tile off and make a chipboard, and then you know what that's going to look like in 3 years. And durability, there's nothing more sustainable than durability, because that's what it is. So we're going to need to collaborate on some of those to get all that stuff together so you can make the right decisions. But you're right, it is all of it.
Any other comments? And I think what we should do is, as we did with the project charter, I'll kind of put this together as a Word document and with the edits that we've discussed today, and send that out to the SBC to review and consider. And you can all send me back your notes.
You know what's interesting, Jenny, is this is small beans in terms of time. There's a lot more to do on it. But when you talk about the educational visioning and the time it takes and the information being gathered, I'm sure it's 10 times more, because there's so many people involved, and it's so much more the heart of what the project is really about, to get that right, and not to build the wrong spaces, and to understand how that's working. And we haven't looked at it yet, because that'll be maybe the next one, but I believe you'll be blown away by the amount of thought and information that's been going on behind the scenes in the educational department and with our planner. And they will likewise come up with guidelines and things like that, which sometimes I don't even know what some of them mean. And I'm an educational architect, like pedagogy. How many times can you say pedagogy? Just a joke. That's a joke. You'll see. There's a pedagogy joke.
I have a question. On the sustainability goals for the site, has there been consideration to heat islands with the amount of concrete and stuff that'll be around the building? The heat in the summertime and using the building all 4 seasons. I'm just wondering about that piece.
It wasn't mentioned, but and it's one of those things where you go, does LEED already take care? There's a lot of things that LEED and your local things already take care of.
Sure.
For example, if we have some flat roofs, they'll have white membrane now, so it doesn't absorb. And we try to limit the amount of asphalt, but then you'll have your parking and the amount of parking spaces you want, and you have your local codes. We kind of negotiate that a little bit. Then there's shading and things like that, which we'll take care of. One of the things that wasn't talked about at all was the idea of green roofs and things like that. Nobody mentioned it. I didn't bring it up because it sounds great. I mean, we went to some schools and there were some greenish roofs, or at least walking roofs. And we will probably look at that as part of it. It's not a panacea, though, first of all, talk about expensive. It's an extraordinarily expensive thing to build, but in the right place for the right reason, it's not a bad idea. But nobody mentioned it, so we didn't write it down. What do you guys think about heat island and/or those things?
Well, I mean, on the town side, I'm sorry.
I think having, obviously, trees and shading is really important. And one of the things that comes to mind is that, and again, this is a built structure, but even at the parking, using some of the shading on the parking for photovoltaic to get additional surfaces. So that's a possibility. There's a cost associated, obviously, with building those. But they do that a lot in a lot of towns, because you can get a lot more area pretty easily. But as far as green roofs, I think I can't figure out how they actually add any value, to tell you the truth, because you're adding water on top of a roof, that really you want to keep water out of. So I haven't seen the application of them very well. I've looked at all of the details for them, and I still can't figure out how they are better.
I'm going to give you my experience on it. We live in a place where when you do a green, if you're thinking about a green roof, you're best to do it in trays that are, just seed them or something that are removable. We live in a climate where it's not California or Arizona or someplace where you plant something and it can grow and it just keeps growing, you know what I mean? And so half the year there's no green up there anyway, it's just something. One of the problems with a direct applied green roof, it's a lot heavier, so your structure gets bigger. If there's a leak, and if it's not trays and stuff, how am I gonna find that leak? And that comes up so much, like, how am I gonna find that leak? And it's a really big deal, and that's why most of the things we did see and we do see are removable systems somehow, trays and/or walking. We did an outdoor terrace outside in Swampscott, out on the 3rd floor outside the innovation lab, where you can go out and you could be on a roof. It cost a bit more, but we saw it because of the tight site as a program space. It's actually a couple thousand, 3,000 square feet of space outside, and they have a tight site like you do. That might be a balance that we talk about, but we're not going to, as an architect, we're not going to force you into that and say, oh, this is where you put your outdoor terrace. We're going to go over it with you, because I find that to be a little, you know what I mean? I don't like that.
There's actually one
Yes.
here in the library, on the 2nd floor, there's an outdoor terrace that had high hopes of being the program space for the children's room, but the cost of putting it together kept it from being done completely.
What is it?
I don't know I don't think they've done anything yet. They're looking for donor.
It might be a future
Yeah,
terrace.
exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it always hits when you get to the value engineering and money. Those are the things that always come up, and I am adamant that you make those decisions, even though sometimes I'll defend something. It's not my building, it's your building. I don't want you guys doing a boondoggle. Is that the right word? A boondoggle?
Yeah.
It's an old term.
Greg Stepler has his hand raised on the Zoom meeting.
It's hard to tell.
Greg?
Greg?
Yep, I was just going to second everything that Nancy said, and Lee as well, with respect to green roofs. Having just finished a couple outdoor green roofs, they're extraordinarily complex and challenging from a waterproofing perspective. They add additional load, structural load to the building, which requires additional reinforcement and a more robust structure. To Lee's point, the kids that aren't in school over the summer are never going to use it when it's actually in its best condition. It's a long-term maintenance challenge between the plants themselves, the irrigation, and then if you do have to troubleshoot and find leaks. This number, I could keep going. I would not advocate for green roofs for any of those and more reasons, and think we'd be better served trying to put more PV on a roof than a green roof.
I think we should take a vote, no green.
Well, what's really interesting is we're struggling in our minds, like educationally, just how do we get the kids to be able to access and use the WOW Center, which is like the garden and the courtyard and all that. That's what's relevant here, is like, how do we get them to use nature? How do we give them access to it? How do we use what we have and make it work? Not necessarily get it on the roof, but unless you want.
I was wondering, before we exit this topic, one thing that the Sustainability Working Group did comment on was the how we would aim for LEED certifications. And Greg, I welcome you to step in, because I seem to remember you really summarizing it nicely, that Lee mentioned that this other school is meeting a gold standard, and I know Saugus has met a platinum LEED standard, but I believe the working group talked about them as using them as goalposts, but not necessarily slavishly trying to reach them. I think Greg said it better.
I think that's a good thing there, is to say, it's the aspects that we want that meet the code and meet all these provisions that we're going for. LEED is a vehicle, is actually just a chart and a vehicle for getting there, and I know Greg agrees with this. The reason I mentioned the thing about the gold was because I've done a couple of MSBA projects. You're supposed to get a LEED, what would be the equivalent points of a LEED, and the truth is, it's not that hard to get to if you do everything the way we're talking about doing it, the way that we have to do them, especially now. And so when I said it was gold, it was because it was gold, but in a reasonable and pragmatic way, it just became that. So it was after the fact. Platinum is another world. You have to try to get platinum. And I believe it costs different money. What was that, Saugus High School or something? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Probably the high school. You have to be very dedicated to a certain, I don't know why you would do it unless it should just naturally do it. Who cares what color it is? And when did platinum become more valuable than gold? I guess it is.
LEED is Swampscott pursuing LEED certification, or
well, you do it automatically. You have to get the LEED certification to get those points. And I was just talking to.
And now it's a baseline requirement for MSBA to meet LEED Silver.
If you want your initial reimbursable, 2% or whatever, it's a baseline. Now it's a baseline. Yes, I understand.
Yeah, now with the baseline, when Swampscott was there, they could get a couple of additional bonus points, if you will, but now it's a baseline.
Yeah, they're just ratcheting it up. So I'm just saying that it's not difficult to get the silver LEED, and that's why they're ratcheting it up, because it's getting too easy.
Thank you, Karen. I'll include that on my list.
Any other things you'd like to add? John, do you have any tweaks or thoughts about this? You were there. I noticed that Jenny separated carbon into two categories. The embodied was here, and then before that was the generated or...
Yeah. And we talked about embodied carbon at length at the meeting of sustainability.
That's right.
And we all agreed that there's no real way you can do anything significant to reduce embodied carbon. I mean, you can tweak around the edges. You can use fly ash in concrete as a cement replacement. You can use timber framing instead of steel. But it's a few percentage differences.
It's a tough one.
There's very little that you can do on site. You can do a lot of off-site, but I don't think Reading is ready to embrace off-site mitigation.
Well, that's an investment.
No, I mean, you can plant 1 million trees and you get carbon offsets like that, but the United States doesn't have that now. If we were building this in Sweden, we'd have to plant 1 million trees to be able to build this building, or something. We don't have carbon offsets. So
if you were building this in Bhutan,
sorry?
Do you know Bhutan, which is next to, which is in the Himalayas?
Yes, Bhutan.
My son was there for a year. In Bhutan, because it's a Buddhist country, and they don't, I'm just telling you, they look at gross national happiness, not the product, but they also have in their constitution a net zero carbon and energy system. So a person actually can't build something unless somewhere in the country, they totally balance it out. It's La La Land.
They also don't have a traffic light in their capital. I'm just saying.
It's also dangerous to drive.
Okay.
It's fun.
Go on. Carla's giving me the go on eye. Okay, so wrapping up, just our next steps for the next couple of weeks ahead. the next month, actually, because our next SBC meeting is March 11th, where we will review the educational visioning, the outcomes of the educational visioning process. March 25th, we'll look at site traffic and existing conditions. Our upcoming community meetings are February 29th, where we will review the project charter and these sustainability goals. So I think for that, I think, well, I guess it's a question. Is it okay with this board that we, after we go through the process of reviewing and crafting the sustainability goals via email, that we share these out to the community? Are we ready to do that?
After those community meetings, are you asking, or no?
No, at the February 29th community meeting.
At it. In other words,
Our plan is to share out these goals.
yeah, we're going to go there and we're going to say, hey, we met with you, here's the project charter, this is what we learned, it's been crafted, and then get their feedback. There might be a couple things where people just say, we don't agree with that at all, and we'll bring it back to you. But it's usually pretty clear. And same with sustainability. It's pretty straightforward stuff.
And we'll put it on our website, too.
Yep. Great. And March 18th will be a site and traffic listening session. So there we're kind of just getting people's feedback and thoughts about the site and traffic issues, and then we'll have another community meeting where we're actually presenting some proposals, which will be after we've shared them with you.
Isn't it, just as a question, that March 18th, it's a listening session, but there will be some materials there that our traffic person shows?
We will be sharing the results of our traffic analysis.
Good. So from my experience, what that means is that they might have like a map of the whole town, and they'll show like some things, like about overall traffic, just some, and where conflict happens, or at certain times of the day. Then they might show the neighborhood, and they can do these safe routes kind of analysis where the kids can walk and can't walk, and this kind of to start to help you decide how to make your school more connected and promote walking. I mean, you could do anything you want on site to promote walking and bikes. We can put a bike rack there, but if the kid can't get there safely, they probably won't be able to do it. And those are the kinds of things that they focus on, which I can't.
And we will be doing space programming March 5th through 7th with the faculty and staff at Killam. And we will be finalizing our existing conditions assessments. That's our plan. Any final comments? That's the end of my presentation.
When do you think you'll have the synopsis of the existing conditions? You know? I'm just curious.
I don't want to, I'll get back to you. Can I get back to you?
Yeah. I'm just more curious. Is it a week? Is it a month? Is it?
Well, there's all these different pieces, so I could give you like a draft in like a week, which is the pieces that we've already completed, but there are other pieces that are still outstanding, the traffic analysis, the site survey, the geotechnical, those haven't been completed yet.
Maybe the focus for us, since you ask, is to focus on the building component parts of it, and which you probably are, and do that first, and then the other things,
More site related.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Jenny.
Thank you.
We raised a question at the last meeting about whether copies of the drawings of the existing building were available in a digital form. Did anybody follow up on that?
We do have drawings of...
We know there are hard copies, paper copies, but...
Yes, we've digitized. Well, the town has digitized some, and then we digitized some as well.
Okay. Can they be published so that we can get access to them?
Sure. Should I send them to Jackie?
Sorry?
Should I send them to Jackie?
Is that something that can be sent there, or is that something that has to sit on a different,
I don't know.
with Ryan
It would be like a large file that would be a download.
There's a lot of paper files and they digitized them.
Yeah, I'm not sure if that's something you put on your website, right? This is for this group.
No.
This is just for you
Put
guys.
it in, we have a Google Drive that we're developing.
A Dropbox kind of thing?
Yeah, everybody can load it up to that for the
For the committee. That's what you want to do.
Yeah, we could do that.
Because when we start having these submissions to the MSBA, they can be big files.
So John, to answer your question, well, we're going to ask Jenny and Lee to get it to us.
Yeah, I think Jenny has the link to the Google Drive. We'll just
If
make
you
a
can drop them in
folder.
the Google Drive, and then we'll share it out with the committee.
Good.
That's okay.
Sounds like a plan.
We can work that offline.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good.
Okay. Mike, do you have anything to say up there?
I was going to jump back into financials if everything else was good.
I think we're good.
Right.
Thank you.
So, happy to get into detail here. Please interrupt me if you have any questions. But I did share this with the financial team. I think Derek has seen this maybe once or twice now, and Matt and Carla and so forth. But what we've tried to do here is give you a summary of your overall total project budget of the $2.2 million. And what we've done is we've shown several categories that may have budgets down the line as we get into the full project budget. But currently, we have the architect and engineer feasibility study. Your initial budget was $740. Ultimately, the contract was signed for $850. So we had to take $110,000 out of contingency to cover that, and so that we have a balanced budget there. Similarly, with the OPM, I think your initial budget was $260. The contract was signed for $280, so we took 20 grand there and we moved that into there. And you can see that that 110 and that 20 are reflected down here as deducts from the contingency line. In addition, we had an initial budget for environmental and site and all these other existing condition reviews for $515,000. To date, we've had amendments 1 through 5 from LPA totaling $208. So we actually have a surplus on that line of $306,000, which we're saying is an uncommitted cost. And we're continuing to track it there because we may have additional items that will hit that budget line in the future. So right now, we're in, I think, overall really good shape. We've got a committed project budget, committed cost of $1.3 million. Our budget is 1.6 before contingency. With contingency goes up to 2.2. And the other thing we can show you is that we've had expenditures to date basically totaling about $60,000 of that $1.3 million. I do have backup documents that kind of will show the details here. So the contingency draws, what we're showing here is $20,000 moving to the OPM line and coming from the contingency line, so it's always a two-step process. And then moving $110,000 to the AE line from the contingency, and then moving the contingency there. So again, it's a two-step process. We're always going to show that. As this project moves forward, what our intent would be is that we will continue to show this, but this area here will actually be kind of grayed out, if you will, like that. So you'll always see it, but anything new between the last meeting and the next meeting, or this meeting and the next meeting, will show up, kind of below that gray area as a non-gray area item that we would be bringing for discussion, basically. So you can always go back and ask questions about the gray, but we always try to show you everything and show you what's happened in real time, basically. We will do a similar process as we go through with commitments. So if I can, I'll zoom in here just a little bit to make it a little larger for you. But we have the initial Colliers Project Leaders contract. We have the LBA contract, which was broken into two parts, one for feasibility, which is the $400,000, and one for schematic design, which is the $450,000. And then we've had those various amendments, and you can see we're tracking them based off of dollar value, based off the date that they were issued, date that they were signed and returned. We have PO numbers if they're applicable, We track them against the MSBA cost codes, which will help with the propane system. And then we have the ability to add some little notes here so that we can have kind of a cheat sheet for what amendment number 1 was or amendment number 4, things of that nature.
Mike, quick question for you.
Yes.
We're going to get into our, the process of payment.
Yes.
And so we've dipped into contingency already. Is there an authorization process if we go over that contingency? There has to be an authorization process, right? From the committee?
Yes.
Because it's not included in the scope of work. Is that right?
So I think that's it. And what we would say, I would say going forward, if we have a commitment, a new commitment, say against the OPM line, like if we might be looking to do an estimate down the line, and the estimate wasn't in there. So that estimate would go in here, this 280 maybe becomes 290, and we would ask for 10,000. When we submit that amendment, we're going to note that in order to do that amendment, we're also going to need to do a contingency draw, and we're going to be able to show you that. But I think your question is if we ran beyond that 550,000, is that what?
You know, I'm sorry, I'm going to jump in. I do have a question about contingency and wondered whether or not the contingency, soft or unanticipated costs, right? So if we're looking at the A&E feasibility study line, so it was estimated at 740. But then there was an authorized change of almost a 15% difference.
So that was the contract.
They're having to draw an additional 110. So just wanted to clarify as to why it couldn't come in on or under budget at this stage.
So I think the budget, I don't know how much scientific calculations were done to establish those budgets. The other thing, if you look at those budgets, we made this a little simpler here when we left the contingency down the bottom here at 685 as one number. I believe if you go back and look at your town contingency, you actually had an escalation in there. You had a design contingency. You had a number of items. And I guess the rationale here was that some of those items really maybe should be transferred up into the lines, but I was only doing it to cover the minimum, basically.
So I think what I'm hoping for is that the project is going to come in on budget or under budget. Doesn't mean we have to spend the full contingency. There'll be some money left over, as it were.
And that's where I was going to go a minute ago when we were talking the overall contingency. We have $555,000 left in contingency, and in reality, we have $306,000 on the line here that's sort of not accounted for yet. So you have almost $900,000 unaccounted for. I don't see any way that we're going to spend that kind of money. We're going to spend some more, but not that much.
I wouldn't expect it to be spent. Yeah, I would think that, so scientific aside, I think that these are some, these kinds of things are anticipated. They're the usual, right? This is not unique or different than any other project that, has been worked on previously. I mean, we've got enough experience in the room, I think, to kind of get those costs down to, really accurate figures without dipping into contingency or going over whatever's been budgeted.
Yeah, we might dip into that contingency, but I don't see any way that we would spend anywhere near that total 550. I think you were very prudent when you established this budget. I think the overall 2.2 was good. I might have split it up a little bit differently. I mean, to look at the big picture here, the initial budget was 1.5 million with 700,000. So our contingency was almost 50% of the budget, which is pretty high.
So sorry, just a further question, clarification. So we are collecting multiple bids for the work, right? So when it's being done, it's not just the first bid or...
So the designer and the OPM were both quality selections. So in other words, you did it based off of the expertise, and then you negotiated the price afterwards. So the price was only with the preferred vendor in both those. If we went chapter 149A, seeing at risk of the contractor, it would be a similar process. If you go to chapter 149, it's design, bid, build, kind of lump sum, low bid. You still have a pre-qualification process there, but it's more driving towards the dollars, which is going to be the major portion of the overall project value.
Thanks, Mark.
Carla, did I answer your question on the contingency?
You did, thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, so, like I said, we're gonna continue to track all those contingency draws right here on this budget adjustments, and those are all gonna show up in this authorized budget changes. So as we go forward, I kind of consider those authorized, but if you notice, when we started, I didn't have them grade here because it was the first time we're really bringing them to this committee, and I wanted to be open and transparent with this. The reason why I marked those as authorized is basically in order to cover the contracts, we had to adjust that. I mean, otherwise we'd be showing an overage on that line, even though the overall project was within budget. But going forward, we're going to continue to manage that. We're going to continue to review that. And as we bring you amendments or anything like that that would affect any adjustments, we will bring it to you so that it's maybe brought in conjunction with the approval, not necessarily after that.
And so, sorry, Mike, in terms of best practice, I think it'd be good for the building committee to know, right? So should there be a change and it require a movement to use contingency funds in order to cover anticipated budgeted costs, based on your experience, the budget's been drawn up, right?
Yes.
So what's the best practice for that I understand the building committee needs to approve those expenses before they happen.
That's right. We would have the building committee approve it, and what I'm saying is, when we bring that to the committee for approval, we will also bring that contingency request as well. So we'll say, going back to the example of if we're asked to hire an estimator, which I think you might want to do, I'm just saying, assume that they were $10,000, I would bring you that we contacted 3 estimators, we got quotes, and based off of the quotes and their availability and their timing and their expertise, we're recommending contract, estimator A.
Right. So these are not going to be approved in arrears. They're going to be approved in advance of the work being done and billed.
That's the intention. That's correct, yes. Yeah.
Thanks.
All right. So just like we track the budget adjustments, we also track all the commitments. So again, this sheet here, next month, these ones will all be grayed out. If we have any new ones, we will show those below the gray. I don't anticipate that there's going to be a lot of these, but LBA is doing some additional review, and I do know that Colliers, we might be looking at an estimator to join our team. So there might be a couple, but again, I don't see us getting anywhere near the overall $2.2 million budget. To date, right now, we're at 1.3, so there's about 900,000 there. In addition to that, what we do is we also track the invoices. So this will give you a list of all invoices. Again, we show the propay code here. When we submit our invoices, what we do is we actually put the cover sheet on them with a recommendation for payment, and we provide the NFPA code, and we actually confirm in that cover sheet that the work has been done, it's been done in accordance with the contract. It's covered within the overall contract, within the overall budget, and then it's ready to be paid.
Sorry, Mike, one more. And so the reason for leaving such a large contingency when we're not going to get anywhere near it is what?
I think that was just the initial budget that was established before we were even involved. So we're just managing to that budget.
So if we know that it's not going to be anywhere close, is there a better use for those funds at this time?
As far as the project goes, I don't know that
Next meeting.
we're just working off the project, the needs. But if you're talking outside the project, that would probably be something that would be either the committee's discussion or somebody else's discussion, not mine.
So Derek, these funds came through town meeting, through free cash, and they will be put into the calculation for reimbursement from the MSBA when the project moves forward. So if the cash doesn't get used, it will just go back to free cash.
And bringing the MSBA is a good point there, Carla, because I think the 2.2 is the MSBA approved budget too, so we're really working on that. That's what they're expecting to see as well. All right, so again, we'll be tracking those invoices. What we are able to do with that information, what we've done is we've done an estimated cash flow based off of kind of our experience. We put in values for the OPM and for the designer and the contingency. I just told you a minute ago that we're not anticipating spending the whole 2.2, but when I do a cash flow, I do show the full value being expended, just because that's the way to kind of properly do a cash flow, or the way that I've always done it, at least. And what we're able to do is add those up into this estimated outlay column, and then we actually take the actual outlays based off of the invoices submitted, and we're actually able to kind of see where they are. So our cumulative total as of the estimate would have been 102,000, and today we spent about 60. So we're trending a little bit under the budget right now, under the estimated cumulative. And what we do is we also do provide that in a graphic format. So you can see the green line is the projected estimated values, and the red line is trending just a little bit below that right now.
Any questions for Mike?
Hold on, Mike. Are you gonna, at the next meeting, you're just gonna update your estimated with your actuals as you go?
What we typically do is we don't actually update those unless we have a major, milestone, like when the contractor comes on or things of that nature. If we have change orders or amendments, we would get those in there as well. But what we like to be able to do is actually track the estimated versus the actuals and see how we're trending. So we're not. So these lines can differ a little bit, but hopefully we've done a good job estimating. They'll stay relatively in line.
Yeah, it looks good to me. Thank you.
Yeah. So the next thing I was going to talk about, so these are the invoices we have today, and I know we've brought invoices to this committee before, and I believe at the XLT we had a little bit of a discussion with the senior leadership that oftentimes invoices may come in off cycle. So if we have a meeting today, I'll give you an example. I think I got LVA's invoice for this month today. So we get that invoice today. We didn't get a chance to get a cover sheet and review it and send it over to you and let you do what you needed to do in order to bring it forth to the committee this evening. So under the old process, I think that invoice would be waiting until the next meeting, which is a month away, in order for you to approve it. So one of the things that we've done with a lot of clients is we've created an invoice workflow chart, and I believe this was sent out to everybody late this afternoon. I apologize that it wasn't sent out last week, but I do know some of the senior leadership did see it last week after the XLT meeting that we had talked about. And the discussion there was, I'm going to read the four items in this box at the top. All invoices need to have a Colliers project leader cover sheet on them. So if somebody, whoever's processing these, and I just call it financial director for now, we can change that title or amend it as needed. But if they got an invoice, like Matt got the invoice from LBA today, and I shot him a quick email and just said, hey, we're going to take a look at this. We'll get a cover sheet on and get it over to you the next day or two. You can hold off on doing anything with it until you get that cover sheet. On that cover sheet, we're going to make a recommendation to pay, and sometimes we might make a recommendation not to pay, but I don't think that's a different discussion. If we're recommending not to pay, then we probably aren't paying it without coming to the committee. But if we make it, if we're comfortable, we put a cover sheet, we make a recommendation to pay, that recommendation will confirm that the scope of the invoice is within the commitment and within the budget. And we're also going to tell you what MSBA code that has to be billed to. What we would recommend there that we go through this workflow, and if the financial director gets to the end, and I'm going to scroll down to the second page, the green boxes here are what we would expect as a typical. They get the payment, they look to see if there's a cover sheet. If there is, it goes down to the yes. Did we confirm the four criteria up in the gray box? The assumption would be yes. The financial director reviews for acceptance. If they find it acceptable, then they process it for payment, confirm it to us, and it would come to the committee at the next available committee meeting. So in other words, in this situation, we're not actually asking the committee to vote and approve every invoice, but the committee had to have voted and approved the commitment that the invoice is going against, or else we can't do it. This whole process stops. So this process would allow us to process invoices as they come in rather than waiting for committee review and approval, but only if, A, they're recommended by us, and B, the person within the town, within the district, reviews it and they find it acceptable as well. So if anybody has any questions, it gets stopped and it gets brought to the committee for review and in an efficient vote.
And this process is for any invoices other than the OPM's invoices. For the OPM's invoices, it is going to be internally reviewed, and then it will be included in the packet for the financial update that we'll receive once a month from Colliers. So even though they'll talk about all of the stuff they slapped a cover sheet on and they approved, they'll include theirs in there also, so we have it all in one area. So they'll talk about that too. But we'll do a different type of internal review of that when it goes out. So the only things that will be brought to the committee specifically is if they're change orders. And this is what we're going to ask people to vote on tonight, that this process is acceptable to people.
Just to be clear on that change order part, if, for example, LBA submitted something with, the one I got today, I haven't opened it yet, but if it had amendment number 6 on there, and we've only approved amendments 1 through 5, I would reach out to Lee and say, hey, I don't know what this amendment 6 is, what is it? And we would have a discussion. More than likely, I would recommend that he has to remove that amendment 6 so that we can process everything else, and we catch up on amendment 6 next month. So that's part of our review process, is that we go through and make sure what they're billing is actually owned in the contract and in already contracted with you guys. And I use, Lee, I use your company as the example because you're the only other vendor other than us right now.
Question. So I don't think Sharon's on the line tonight. Has she had a chance to take a look at this and she's good with this?
Yes, we had a meeting after our XLT meeting, we stayed after, and we came up with that process, and Sharon and Derek both went through pro pay training and are becoming familiar with that and putting these invoices into the pro pay system. And that's the system that the MSBA will hopefully be sending money towards us through that system.
Okay. This is great, and I'm, as long as Sharon's seen it, and it's great that Derek as well.
I'm actually online and I did see it.
Oh,
Sharon, okay.
thank you. Great. Wonderful.
So can we take, any other questions about this process before we talk about a vote? Can we just take this out of order? Can you make a motion to?
Sure. Move to adopt the invoice payment process workflow dated February 12th.
So hold on a second. We have to take this out of order because we have an update from the communication subcommittee. So
Okay.
Move to switch the financial update vote on payment process before the communications working group update.
So moved.
And could we have a vote on that? This is just to move it in the agenda because we didn't list it properly. Karen?
Yes.
John?
Aye.
Kirk?
Yes.
Nancy?
Yes.
Sarah?
Yes.
Greg?
Yes.
And Carla, yes. Okay. Go ahead.
Okay.
Thank you.
Move to adopt the invoice payment process workflow dated February 12th, 2024, as recommended by the OPM.
Second.
Seconded by Nancy. Any further discussion? Okay, Karen?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Kirk?
Yes.
Nancy?
Yes.
Greg?
Yes.
Sarah?
Yes.
Carla, yes, and that passes. Thank you. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
Okay, and then we'll have a communications working group update. Would you like to do something?
I can talk a little bit about that. Yeah. Yeah, so we have quite a number, we've been working right along, we've been meeting weekly, and we've done a number of things. So we've lined up I've met with Jenny, and we've lined up our public engagement sessions through August. So we have She mentioned previously the February 29 sustainability goals and project charter meeting. March 18 will be meeting on the site and traffic listening session. April 1 is site and traffic design alternatives. April 11 is preliminary design alternatives. July 8th is the evaluation alternatives, and the preferred solution will be presented August 8th. And we've created times and locations for all of those meetings so that we can publish those out to the community through all the various channels that we've identified. So that's why we wanted to get ahead of all that and get that all lined up. So that's been done. The website we had previously in this group talked about a couple of vendors and doing some work there. And the superintendent and Olivia in his office proposed doing it in-house. And so they have been working on that with Carla and some parent volunteers, and have come up with really quite a wonderful solution based on committee input for the different elements we want to keep it simple, keep it clean, and then have sort of the information architecture on the back end do what we want it to do. So that has been, we've looked at a draft of that so far. That's really exciting. And the intention is to launch it on the same date as the sustainability meeting so that we can highlight it at that meeting. So that's the goal. It's a stretch goal. But you guys have, Carol has just done an excellent job, and Olivia has just been amazing, and Tom has been really supportive of that. And so it's great. So the intention here is we won't spend that $30,000 to $40,000. It'll be done in-house by staff, including staff that I work with, Matt's staff. So it's going to be done internally, and it will be kept to basically about 4 people. So it's a tight communication circle, and then everything is pushed out. So that's been done. Lindsay, the principal, has set up a Google document repository for us that she uses, and now we are adding more resources into that. So we've used some community sources for photos, and then we're going to be getting more resources to build up this repository, and that's where we'll put some of the digitized plans that we have for the existing building and whatever else. This committee will be given that link to view it, not necessarily everybody to edit it, so that we keep cleanliness of that, but everybody will be able to look at it. Does that make folks are comfortable with that? And you'll all have that. We'll have that sent out to you when it's ready to start looking at. And then, there'll be a methodology if something needs to come to be pushed out. We'll work up that workflow. We sent out our first community notification to the neighborhood. We worked with our GIS planner to identify the neighborhood, so we can send out mailings, and we can do that very easily. We haven't had to do that yet, but just to let them know of some project work that's going on in their community, so they know the police are aware of what this work is going on, so they don't need to call the police and say, wow, there's people working on here at night. So it's all worked out very well, and the feedback from the principal is that the PTO is really happy to start getting that call. So if there's anybody who would like to be on that list that doesn't live in that neighborhood, please email me and I will add you to the list. Yes. So we can do that. Let's see what else. Oh, and then we're coming up with, we do kind of a lot of contemporaneous thought partnership in these meetings. So one idea that came out of them is these snippet videos. And Tom is going to be working with a member of staff that also works for RCTV to do some really short videos that can be digital collateral, like the why and the how and what matters. And then we will do those, we'll put those together in small pieces that are very digestible online and push those out. And it will help kind of tell that story from folks like Carla, from Karen, from Tom, Matt, or, and whoever needs to be on that to make the case. Not tell people how to vote, but, to let people know. And then I did, at Carla's request yesterday, or Thursday, sent out the guidance that Matt secured from council that will be discussed at a future meeting. But for folks who really should take a look at that, it is 27 pages. Most of it is not the distinct guidance, but there's a table, and it's based on your role and what you can or can't do vis-a-vis advocation for the project. That's what I have right now. Is that good?
And as you can see, Jane is the right person to be chairing this committee. She's fabulous.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
That's it.
All right, thank you.
It's, we had a little rocky start and we just kind of took off.
That's great. Thank you.
So we will roll out the website, like Jane said, on the 29th. And then we'll let everybody know the link, and then we'll show it at our March 11th meeting too.
Yeah.
And then feel free to comment away and ask for changes and all that kind of stuff.
Thank
And we
you.
did it for like under $300 a year.
Yeah, that's great.
Well, and what's really great is that, Olivia has just stepped into it. And I don't know if, Tom, if you want to speak to that, but she really has stepped into the role and taken ownership of it and made it possible for us to do this in-house on staff. So that's great.
Yeah, Olivia's not with us tonight, but I think she's done a wonderful job taking this on, and I think it's been a great team effort too. And kind of we'll give all of our thanks to everyone once we get it up and running next week. We've had a lot of people behind the scenes and parents and things like that, parent helping us and things like that. So look forward to showing it when it gets in another couple of weeks, but definitely a great team effort. And also just echoed thanks to Jane for kind of galvanizing this group to start to move this work forward.
That's great. And our meetings are 1 hour. They are lunchtime on Thursdays. That's it.
All right, that was a dig. We'll keep moving.
No, it wasn't a dig. That's just one of my things.
Yeah.
Okay, the next item, approval of prior meeting minutes. Everybody had a chance to kind of look at that? Karen, you want to make a
What's the date on those?
Yeah, what's the
No, I
date?
couldn't open it.
I don't
I
know.
can't open these, so I can't open it.
I'll be abstaining as I wasn't present for that meeting.
Okay.
Busy day today, I couldn't open it. Even up on it.
January 22nd.
What are you looking for?
Was the last meeting January 22nd?
Yeah, the January
Look at the
22nd.
date for the meeting minutes.
Yep, January 22nd.
January 22nd.
Okay, move to accept the meeting minutes of the Killam School Building Committee for January 22nd, 2024, as written.
Second.
Seconded by Nancy. Any further discussion? Okay, we'll take a vote. Karen?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Kirk?
Yes.
Nancy?
Yes.
Sarah?
Yes.
Carla? Yes. And it passes. Thank you, everyone. And for future agenda items, for our next meeting, upcoming meetings, we have the community meeting on the 29th. At our March 11th meeting, we will roll out or show the committee the website. Anything else people want to? We'll have other things, obviously, to talk about.
I'm hoping in March we might have a visit. We'd be able to visit an electric school. So, could we do it that early? Like not wait till June?
Yeah, we'll work on it.
Okay.
I don't know what to say.
Okay, fine. That's all right. That's why it's
I
a
don't
future
have-
agenda item. Okay.
Great. I'll entertain one more motion.
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
Okay? No further discussion. Karen?
Yes.
John? Kirk?
Yes.
Nancy?
Yes.
Sarah?
Yes.
Greg?
Yes.
Carla? Yes. We're adjourned. Thanks, everyone.